Welcome back to our next Rectory Ramble. I'm speaking really loud right now. I'm not entirely sure.
Just want to make sure the mics pick you up well.
Yeah, just making sure. We have a lot of questions that have come from you, and so we're going to get right into them. Number one is that what do you do in your off time? What do you do in your off time, guys?
Well, for me, I like to play a little bit of cards every now and then. But really, I really like to walk, go around the neighborhood, pray a rosary, and definitely get out. Getting outside is awesome now, especially with the quarantine. So, yeah, some fresh air.
Yeah, very good. How about you guys?
Brother Joe, after you.
Well, I recently have gotten into sailing. One of the parishioners taught me how to sail 2 summers ago. And last fall I bought myself a little sunfish. But it had a lot of leaks, and it was kind of a problem, so I actually sold it and got a better one that's in much better shape, and I've taken it out a few times with Christian. I'm not sure if you know you'd be sailing at this rectory, but we've done that a few times, so that's one of the things I like to do.
Just make sure you wear a life vest.
Yeah, we do, especially with the winds now.
Yeah, go ahead. What do you?
Yeah, I love cooking and baking, so I have a terrible sweet tooth, so baking is one of my favorite ways to kind of burn time. I love playing with the chemistry and manipulating all the variables and stuff in recipes and testing all that out. So it takes a lot of time, so whenever there's a big chunk of free time, I love to do that.
Yeah.
We really lucked out with these seminarians because not every seminarian knows how to cook. I'd say most probably don't. I think some parishioners are concerned that we're like not eating well during the quarantine and getting really hungry, but I think I'm actually gaining weight since this has all started because you guys are cooking so well. It's been great.
That's exactly right, and that's actually what I like to do in my free time. I like to eat. It's an unfortunate we're eating really well here, but pretty well too. No, I like to hang out with friends and family. I like to read. I like to go outside myself and play sports. Certainly because of the coronavirus, we haven't been able to do that very much. But we also been watching movies. Right, we've been watching movies.
Yeah.
I've watched more movies in the past couple of weeks than I have probably the past few years. It's been amazing.
Before this pandemic came, we still had never actually seen a movie together.
That's right.
But now we've watched like 4.
Yeah, it's great. So we're looking for good movies. We're actually having, in one respect, a difficult time coming up with a consensus on what a good movie to watch is. What kind of movie? What are your favorite movies? Let us know in the chat box, because we really want to watch good movies and not waste our time. We only can watch so many Mission Impossible movies. I mean, like, we're going to watch the whole series now. So, yeah, please let us know what your favorite movies are and what we should be watching.
We also had one person comment on our fireplace. They said it looks very nice. They wanted to know, this is someone from California actually, they wanted to know if it's real, like did we make the fire or is it gas powered? So the question is, it is real, like it's actual flames, it's warm right here, but it's not real wood, it's gas powered. So you just turn on a little dial and it fires right up. It's pretty great.
Okay, so the next question is a little bit more of the serious one. Do you think the coronavirus is a chastisement from God?
I've definitely heard a lot of different variations of that question.
Yep. Some people like to think that somehow God is up in heaven trying to punish us, trying to get us to repent and doing evil things in order to do that. Certainly as Christians, we can never attribute to God anything other than how he's revealed himself to us, especially in Jesus, the fullness of God. God's revelation is love and mercy, right? And at the same time, he often allows us to experience the consequences of our sin in order to get us to turn back to him. This is something he's done over and over throughout salvation history. And so one of the things that I recommended on our Facebook page is one of my friends, Dr. Mary Healy, wrote an article asking that exact question. And she's a biblical scholar. She's on the Pontifical Council or Pontifical Biblical Commission. She's very, very good. And so I want to encourage anyone who wants to know whether or not this coronavirus is a chastisement from God. If you want to know a kind of a biblical response, a Christian response to that, please see that article on our Facebook page.
We could also put a link in the description of this video.
Yep, that's true. That's true.
Yeah. And another question we had was a continuation from a question from last time. We talked about how we are very bold in saying our Father. That's why we dared to say our Father. And the question that came up was, well, if we dare to say our Father, how come we, before the Eucharist, when we come to receive it, we receive it standing? The question of, well, if it's such if the Eucharist is Jesus, why aren't we, on our faces? In like instance of apparitions, right? People are always seem to be on their knees or prostrate in reverence. Why aren't we always like that, standing? I don't know if any of you had a.
I mean,
I have a guess, but I don't know if it's right.
well, throw it out there.
Sure. I think, in order for us to receive the Eucharist, like, if we're really experiencing the full presence of God, like St. Paul went blind for 3 days.
Mhm.
He just got absolutely blasted by the Lord and His graces. So, like, is there a perfect way to receive Christ in the Eucharist? And so, we try to do our best to be as reverent as possible
Mhm.
while we go up to receive Him.
Mhm.
But in reality, we're not even worthy enough to receive Christ,
Mhm.
and so we just we try to do our best in
Mhm.
the most reverent and respectful way possible.
Mhm.
And obviously, what matters most of all is the inner disposition of the heart. The outward posture is meant to lead to a disposition of the heart, but sometimes there's a disconnect there. We might just be going through the motions. So what's most important is that in our hearts we have this deep love and devotion and reverence for the Eucharist.
Yeah, it's meant to be an expression of what's going on interiorly as well. The question, if I remember the way it was phrased, was how can we casually stand before the Eucharist? Well, if you're casually standing, the very question says that you're probably doing something wrong. You don't casually stand before the living God. But I think that the deeper question is how is it that we engage in God's presence in these different modes, right? When there's an apparition, right, there's a greater awareness of, and just to the mind of who you're standing in front of. And sometimes there's an emotional or a physical response to that revelation. And so one of the things we need to remember is that when we're encountering God in the sacraments, we respond with regard to our faith. Who is it that we believe we're in the presence or in whose presence are we in, right? And so the question is a very good question because it causes us to remember or to think about, who am I engaging here? This isn't some sort of like normal thing that I'm eating. Like, I'm engaging with the living God. And so there should be a response of incredible reverence. But to say that there's only one possible way of approaching that doesn't take into account not only the interior disposition, but it doesn't take into account the different modes in which God is present. Because you could say the same thing about God when you're praying right before you go to bed, like kneeling at your bed, like, why aren't you on your face? Well, God didn't create us to live on our face the whole time. There's places where people were standing in front of the living God in Jesus' presence. People, just St. John was leaning his breast or his head on his breast, right? There's ways in which God can become more familiar, but it's that interior disposition. How do we understand our relationship with Him, and how do we respond accordingly? So it's a very, very good question. I would say the answer would be, don't ever casually stand before Jesus. He is our King and our Lord. He's our beloved. He's our Savior. Stand before Him with remarkable reverence and remarkable love.
And also, don't get overly hung up on these things, because sometimes we can get so fixated on smaller details of the liturgy that we sort of get sidetracked from the fullness of the mystery that's actually taking place.
Yeah.
There are bigger things to get worked up about.
Yeah, I guess kind of going off of the discussing that concept of kind of becoming casual sometimes in the liturgy and not having that full reverence. I know for myself, at least, entering with this quarantine, right? I went into it with a lot of kind of a sense of excitement of this is a different time and Easter's coming, and there was a lot of energy and thoughts of, okay, well, I can grow my relationships with the priests and with Christian, my brother seminarian. I can grow in academics and get better in all these areas. I can read these books. And so there's all this zeal, but after about 3 weeks now, I'm starting to lose some of the steam and the excitement, and there's less patience, there's not as much excitement for academics, there's not really as much fervor, and I think it's important to recognize as we've hit this halfway point in the quarantine, we really need to kind of renew our dedication to living in the present where the Lord has us now, which is right now we're living in the graces of Easter. We're celebrating the fact that Jesus has conquered death and that we get to access God as our Father and in a deep personal relationship. And I think it's time for everyone right now just to really refocus your zeal when you're living at home with seeking to live out that relationship with your family and love and sacrificing for each other and choosing to be patient and to live in virtue and love with them, as well as committing yourself to growing in love of Christ, because we're still celebrating Easter. The next 8 days are just straight celebration of the fact that Easter has happened and it's still happening as we speak. So it's just encouragement. Keep up the dedication to prayer, especially among the family, and seeking to grow in virtue during this season. I think that's important.
That's great. Totally agree.
So we had a question from a second grader, and it's a very deep theological question for such a young student. But she asked, how is it that Jesus can be fully God and fully human? And certainly on like just a basic level, it makes sense how that could be difficult to understand, because how are you two things at once, especially things that are so there's an infinite chasm between divinity and mortality and humanity. So let me just first say that this whole mystery, this question, was basically the source of all of the Christological heresies for the first several centuries of the church. This is what there was so much debate about and so much disagreement for hundreds of years. You can go through all of the different heresies, and they're all sort of veering in one way or another away from the core truth that the church eventually clarified and settled on, and that's that Jesus is fully God and he is fully human. It's not like half and half. It's not like divinity just sort of cloaks over the humanity, or maybe you guys can remember some of these iterations better than I can. You've been in seminary more recently, but there are all sorts of variations of the heresies. But the truth is that God is both completely, fully. And obviously it doesn't exactly answer the question, how can that be, right? How is it even possible? Theologians try to explain it, but this is one of those areas where at the end of the day you just have to say, this is a place where you have to just live in the mystery. How is it that God makes that happen? I don't really know.
One analogy that I like to use is that analogy between the divinity and humanity of Jesus coexist in a similar way that the soul and the body do, right? So how is it that Kevin can have a body and a soul at the same time? Well, because the body and the soul are able to coexist together. And in a very interesting relationship they have that. It's a similar thing with Jesus' divinity and humanity. They're able to coexist together in one way that one doesn't overtake the other, right? The body doesn't overtake the soul doesn't overtake the body. Yes, the analogy breaks down once you understand the philosophical underpinnings of that, but it might be helpful for a second grader to know, you have a soul and you have a body. How can you have both? Well, I don't know, but you do. You do have both a soul and a body. Oh, that's cool. That makes sense, right? So we don't have to get overly technical about it. I don't know very many Christians that can understand the difference between Nestorianism and Monophysitism and all these different heresies. At the same time, God brings us and him together in Jesus. He brings our humanity and himself together, or some people call him the God-man. And so it's a fascinating mystery.
Do either of the seminarians remember the theological term for what we're talking about? The God and man.
The hypostatic union.
Very good.
Wow,
Hypostatic union.
Extra points for you.
That you can go home and tell your family you learned something new today. It's called the hypostatic union, that Jesus is fully God and fully man. Before we get to the last question, we should have you guys show off the plaques that were just given to you.
Oh, mine's over there. Christian can show it. I have the same one.
So these were actually just given to me and Kevin as a gift from Mike, right? I don't know his last name.
Parishioner.
Parishioner here at St. Pat's, and it's awesome. It's got a little fishing lure on it, and it also Matthew 4:19, and I will make you fishers of men. And so that was just it was a really great gift. Sort of like just realizing, how grateful me and Kevin are, especially for being here, and for Father Matthias and Father Joe. It has been an absolute blessing to us, because some of our seminarian brothers aren't even at rectories.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And so they're actually staying at families' houses, and so they're not able to actually receive the sacraments like me and Kevin are. So it's just an absolute blessing to live with them, actually get to see, how they live their priesthood during this epidemic.
Mm-hmm.
And it's quite a gift. And this will be a great memory of that. So that's awesome.
Coronavirus 2020.
That's right.
There's your plaque.
Well, you did a lot of pandemic penance. So some people have also been asking, are you guys going to really get a dog? Are you actually going to get Father Joe back when you're pranking him? All sorts of different things. A couple things. We're not getting a dog because Father Joe can't even take care of himself, let alone take care of a dog. I don't know. There's no way we're going to be able to do that, right? Number two, getting Father Joe back. I have gotten him back already. I just don't know if I want to show everybody.
It was weak.
It was weak.
He could show you.
No, I'm actually not going to because it was going to be a part of a larger thing. But I just don't want to hurt him, So, no, it's really good. It's there's a lot of things that they've been trying to do, and I don't know. I don't know what we should do. I think we should. We have one more person we want to ask. I think Gobbles. Can you tell us what is it that we should do to get Father Joe back? Gobbles.
I think
He's a little shy right now.
Shy.
He doesn't really like cameras very much, but essentially, Gobbles is a new member of our household. He's pretty loud at times. He tried scaring Father Joe once. Father Joe was not amused. Gobble has scared me in the middle of the night when my sister was here for Christmas and put him under my pillow, and I woke up in the middle of the night and I was hearing all sorts of noises that were happening. Father Joe, can you have everyone hear what Gobble sounds like? So Gobble, when he's really annoying, but either way, he's been hanging out at the Rectory, and he's going to help me get Father Joe back. So thanks again for joining us in Rectory Ramble. Hope to see you next time.